Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a profound plunge into some really challenging material.
I find challenge it.
It's a lecture by the late Dr. Amos Wilson titled Moving Beyond White Supremacy. And this address, it was recorded, uploaded by Black Power Media. It's much more than just a talk.
Oh, absolutely. It's a dense, multi-layered critique.
Exactly. He gets into how we understand history, the nature of power, the very structures of society, especially, concerning the African diaspora. For anyone looking to really grasp systemic dynamics and maybe arm themselves with some crucial insights, this deep dive, it's going to be, I think, incredibly valuable.
Indeed. Dr. Wilson's work, it's known for its intellectual rigor and, frankly, unyielding challenge to a lot of conventional narratives.
Right.
What's really fascinating here, I find, is how he dissects these really complex societal issues. He pushes you, the listener, to critically examine assumptions about progress, about freedom, even about how we define intelligence itself.
So our mission today really is to act as your guides through this. We want to extract the core arguments, maybe some surprising insights from this really dense, impactful lecture.
Yeah, the goal is to illuminate Dr. Wilson's perspective in detail, help you understand the arguments he's making, the ones presented in the source material. We're not here to endorse or refute his specific views, just to help understand them.
Right. It's about gaining a deeper comprehension of this significant voice and the knowledge he was trying to impart.
Exactly, a deeper comprehension.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Dr. Wilson, he immediately sets the stage with a premise that kind of flips our usual approach to history on its head. He asserts that history is way more than just, collecting heroic tales or a past to celebrate or even just remembering struggles. For him, history is a critical, practical tool, like an absolute necessity for navigating the present and shaping the future.
A tool for survival, almost.
Yes. And he issues this stark warning. He says those who misread history are as doomed as those who don't know it. And then he goes even further, suggesting that those who fail to read it at all may not have a chance to learn it again. That's pretty unsettling right out of the gate. What's he really driving at there?
Well, it's absolutely foundational for him. He's directly challenging that deeply ingrained American concept of progress.
Yeah.
The idea that things must, by some natural law, just inevitably get better over time.
Right, the upward curve.
Exactly. He's saying very clearly that's a dangerous illusion. He states flat out, there is no law in the universe that tells you that your future survival is guaranteed. And this isn't just philosophy. He backs it up with grim historical reality, reminding us that, quote, races and ethnic groups who have been virtually wiped out on this planet exist.
Wow.
So for him, there's no inherent safety net for any group, and definitely not for those who failed to learn the right lessons from the past.
And he really drives that point home, doesn't he? This blind faith in inevitable progress, this idea we're somehow destined to end up better off than our ancestors. He sees it as a profound, maybe even fatal, miscalculation.
Absolutely. He argues our collective failure to study history rigorously, analytically, means we often miss the basic truth that progressions and regressions occur in history, and integrations and disintegrations occur.
So it's not a straight line.
Not at all. History, for Dr. Wilson, and I'm quoting him here, is not a fairy tale where certain things are accomplished and then people live happily ever after.
Yeah.
He's basically telling you, the listener, to shed the naive optimism, embrace a more sober, practical understanding of how history actually works, because our existence might literally depend on it.
And he gives a really concrete historical example to hammer this home, right? The cyclical view.
He does. He highlights how gains can be made only to be tragically lost again. He references an article from, I think it was October 1981, in Emory magazine by Laurent Bennett.
Laurent Bennett, who wrote Black Power USA.
That's the one. The article was titled something like, Will History Repeat Itself and Rob Blacks of the Games of the 1960s? And Bennett draws these striking comparisons between the first Reconstruction era, 1860s, 1870s, and the Civil Rights era of the 1960s and 70s. This comparison is absolutely central to Wilson's argument.
Why? What's the connection he's making?
It demonstrates that so-called victories can be incredibly fleeting if the underlying power structures, the real power, remain unchallenged.
And the parallels he draws, they are genuinely uncanny. It's that sense of déjà vu he describes. During that first Reconstruction, right after the Civil War, there was actually a black man in the U.S. Senate.
Yes, several, in fact, over the period.
And Louisiana had a black governor.
For a time, yes. PPS pinchback.
Wow. And black sheriffs, mayors across the South. He even mentioned speculation about a black vice presidential candidate way back then. This is over a century before Jesse Jackson's run.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? Achievements many people associate only with the 20th century civil rights movement actually had precedence in the 19th century.
Precedents that were lost.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about individuals in office. Dr. Wilson emphasizes that period saw, and again, I'm quoting roughly, a network of civil rights laws that seemed to settle the issue beyond all possibility of dispute or recall.
Stronger laws, even.
In some ways, arguably yes. There was a federal law protecting voting rights, specifically in the South, a national public accommodations law. These kinds of sweeping federal protections existed decades before the 1960s Freedom Rides or the landmark Civil Rights Act.
Okay, but despite all that the laws, the representation Wilson has that really poignant, almost cynical observation.
Yes. Racism was forever abolished in America for the first time. It was a short forever. Such a powerful statement, isn't it? It implies that these declarations of progress often hide underlying vulnerabilities. The foundations weren't secure.
A short forever. Yeah, that's chilling. It's not just that gains were made, but they were declared permanent, supposedly settled, and then just brutally reversed. Dr. Wilson quotes Bennett again, right, saying the first Reconstruction ended in a major historical catastrophe that wiped out the gains of the 1860s.
Correct. And here's the kicker, the part that really underscores his cyclical view of history. It then required, quote, 100 years and oceans of blood for Black people to climb back into the political plateau they had occupied in the 1860s and 70s.
Well, a whole century just to get back to where they had already been.
A century of struggle to regain ground previously held and lost. Which raises, for Dr. Wilson, this profoundly important question. If history works in these cycles, these regressions, what happens if a similar regression occurs in his present day, a time he views as even more severe, more precarious?
What does he think happens?
He asserts very starkly that a comparable regress would mean annihilation for Africans, not only in America, but for Africans the world over. For him, history isn't academic. It's the supreme lesson for America, and only a correct reading of it, one without illusions, can mark a turning point.
So it's about practical lessons of power, survival, not just celebrating figures like Martin Luther King, for instance.
Precisely. It's about understanding the cold, hard mechanics of power and how to secure gains, not just achieve them momentarily.
Okay. And that leads him pretty seamlessly into his critique of, well, relying too heavily on laws and political appointments as the main path to liberation.
Yeah, he argues very directly that laws are no stronger than their enforcers. That's a fundamental challenge to the idea that legislation alone secures rights.
Because the paper doesn't matter if the people enforcing it don't believe in it or have other interests.
Exactly. He elaborates, saying true fairness rests not in laws, but in the activities of people and in attitude and consciousness of people. Meaning, even the best laws are fragile if the underlying attitudes, the consciousness of those in power, and maybe even the general population, aren't genuinely aligned with justice.
He gives that really stark hypothetical, doesn't he?
He does. The one about choosing between feeding white children and Black children. He says, in that crunch, no amounts of civil rights laws or any other laws on the books will prevent those people from feeding their children first. It's harsh, but it illustrates his point about where real power, real priorities ultimately lie in a crisis.
And he connects this right back to Reconstruction, right?
Directly. He points out that even things like the War on Poverty or the Freedmen's Bureau, plus the civil rights laws back then, were, in some cases, he argues, stronger than the civil rights laws passed in the 1960s and 70s.
But they still failed to secure lasting change.
And that leads to what's really fascinating. Wilson's critical assertion that despite all these efforts, legislative and programmatic, the election of Black men and women does not secure the salvation of African people. He says it repeatedly. Black mayors, governors, jobs in white corporations in no way assures the survival of Black people.
Why not? Isn't representation important?
He'd say it can be, but it's superficial if it doesn't fundamentally alter the power dynamic. It's about who controls the resources, the institutions, the economy, not just who holds temporary office.
He uses that example from South Carolina during Reconstruction, which is just incredible.
Yeah, it's powerful. At one point, Black legislators were actually the majority in the South Carolina legislature.
A majority. And what did they do?
They established public school systems. They even provided social and economic benefits to poor whites, benefits the wealthy white elite had previously denied them.
So progressive governance, clear political power.
Undeniable. Yet, despite all that, those gains were lost. And Wilson then repeats, for emphasis, that the morals and educational qualifications of blacks obscure the main point, power or the lack of power. He worries, saying, "We don't talk about that issue very much today. It seems to frighten many of us." He's pushing you, the listener, to ask, why do we avoid that uncomfortable truth about raw power?
So the leaders back then, in both reconstructions, according to him, failed to secure the economic base.
That's his argument. They failed to provide the necessary economic balance, the true power for the community. He points back to what he calls the black masters of the 1860s, people who understood freedom wasn't secure without a firm economic foundation.
Which leads him to challenge the listener directly, right? About education and goals.
Very directly. He says if your education, your job hunt, your pursuit of degrees, homes, nice clothes, if it's not fundamentally about gaining real power, then you are being misguided and misled, and you will die educated and misled. It's incredibly blunt, designed to shock you into reevaluating your priorities.
Wow. Die educated and misled. He doesn't mince words. And he says the same about studying black history just to feel good.
Exactly. If it's merely an exercise in feeling good about yourself, then you will die feeling good, but still disempowered. For Wilson, history study must be about gaining power, practical power.
He asks that rhetorical question, why do others object so strongly to an African-centered curriculum? It's not just ignorance.
No, he said you'd be sadly mistaken to think it's just hate or ignorance. From his perspective, these people know, I think, better than we do, that a sound approach to history represents an empowerment of people. He even mentions a white instructor who admitted it was about power, about who will be in power and who will rule, implying the opposition stems from understanding the stakes, not from misunderstanding.
And he ties these objections directly to white supremacy. He mentions protests, people worrying about Western culture being destroyed, calling it anti-white.
Right. And Wilson, from his viewpoint, actually agrees there's truth there, because he believes Western culture, the enslaver, the destroyer, the degrader of African people should be destroyed. And by extension, white people, the degraders, enslavers and killers, should be removed from power.
Now, it's crucial to understand what he means by destroy and remove from power here, isn't it? He's not necessarily talking literal violence against individuals.
That's a critical clarification, yes. It seems he's talking about dismantling the systems, the structures, the mindsets that perpetuate dominance and control. It's about a fundamental shift in economic, political, cultural power, a transformation, not necessarily a literal physical annihilation of people.
Okay. And he warns against treating racism like just an abstract concept.
Very strongly. He says racism is not a concept. It is active people engaging in a type of interaction with other people. To really remove racism, he argues, you must remove their capacity to engage in these activities.
So just talking about the idea of racism isn't enough?
Worse than not enough. It can be counterproductive, he suggests. Because while people are citing abstractions, the reality is still destroying you. It's a call to move beyond theory and confront the actual mechanisms of oppression.
Which brings us to that stark contemporary example he uses, the 60 Minutes report.
Right, the one about employment agencies in New York discriminating systematically against black people. The CBS crew did that experiment.
The resumes, yeah. The black woman, clearly more qualified, typing faster, fewer mistakes.
72 words per minute, 3 mistakes, I think he says, consistently denied opportunity.
While the less qualified white woman, 50 words per minute, 15 mistakes.
Gets offered jobs, even cab fare for interviews. It just vividly showed how qualifications became totally secondary to race in practice.
And then the really disturbing part, the black woman defending the company on air. Wilson calls her old Aprils, maybe suggesting a psychological detachment.
He describes her body language as abstracted from reality. Denying discrimination, even as the internal memo proving it was exposed.
So what's Wilson's takeaway from that whole incident?
His conclusion is stark. Black people, especially those visible in the dominant society, are being prepared to put a black face on white power and to defend white interest. And he argues you must be ignorant of history or mistreated in order to play this kind of game.
So suppressing historical understanding is key to maintaining that dynamic.
That's exactly his point. It enables this kind of self-sabotage, this defense of the oppressor's interests, because the historical context, the why, has been erased.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit to maybe one of the most powerful and complex parts of his lecture, the deep psychology of oppression.
Yes, this is absolutely crucial to his whole framework. He uses that analogy from psychology. Amnesia.
Right. You are more a victim of history by not knowing it than in knowing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He argues that what happened in the past, especially the trauma of slavery, isn't locked away in history books. It's pressingly present in the youngest black child today. In the human mind, he asserts, there's no real past. Every historical experience continues to exist, right now, influencing every way you look at the world and relate to other people. Even down to, as he mentions, the way one speaks, what he calls black dialect. History as a living psychological force.
Which leads him to that really controversial point about different psychologies.
Yes, that the psychology of our children is different from that of the psychology of white children. And his stark warning that standard psychology courses based on European models are incorrect, they'll make you dumber, and ultimately cripple these children because they just aren't appropriate for understanding black children or guiding their destiny.
And he claims there's no such thing as a neutral and non-political psychology. That's radical.
It absolutely is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, he extends that critique way beyond psychology. Controversially, he claims even physics, mathematics, and computer science aren't neutral or objective.
How can math not be neutral?
He argues they all flow from the consciousness and mind of man within a specific political, social, economic context. So, the danger, as he sees it, is immense. If black people are trained in these sciences without understanding this political context, without asking whose interests the science serves,
Then what?
then they will be used by your enemies to destroy you and your children. He gives that deeply cynical example of a program about blacks in space being used by the enemy to rain death and destruction on black people on this earth.
And he mentions Colin Powell leading forces against black people in Panama.
Yes, seeing that as a direct example of this politically uncritical application of technical skill and knowledge serving, in his view, oppressive interests.
He takes this idea of psychological control even further, talking about a chronic state of hypnosis in the black community.
Right, an induced mental fog. He references that Omni magazine article from '84 about timeless minds and the experiment with the hypnotized student.
Where manipulating his attitude towards his past actually changed his abilities.
Exactly. It manipulated his consciousness and real capacities and abilities, leading to memory problems, meaninglessness, confusion. Wilson draws a direct parallel to historical amnesia in the community.
So what's the grand thesis here? Manipulating history has real psychological effects.
That's precisely it. The manipulation of history creates real effects in the individual's personality.
Right.
Not knowing your history correctly or being taught a distorted version puts you into a state of consciousness where many of your abilities are wiped out and destroyed.
Keeping potential undeveloped, preventing challenges to power.
Yes. Keeping potential forever undeveloped, and crucially, preventing any real challenge to those who rule. Which leads him to that provocative claim. The world is ruled by 10% Europeans, and the other 90% must literally be out of their minds to allow it.
And he asks that incredibly pointed question.
How can you inhabit the richest continents on this earth and be the poorest people living on it? It challenges the perceived intelligence of the oppressed, suggesting a deep, induced psychological incapacitation is at play.
He argues that surface changes, skills, degrees, jobs often just maintain the status quo, working for someone else's profit.
Right. He points out even enslaved people had advanced skills, trades, crafts, but they remained enslaved. Knowledge or skills alone, without real power and self-determination, won't bring liberation.
And forgetting history isn't just about heroes, it's about forgetting practical techniques.
Exactly. Forgetting economic, political, even military techniques used for survival and nation building. Studying someone like Shaka Zulu, he implies, should teach concrete lessons in statecraft, not just admiration for a warrior.
He also touches on the family unit, doesn't he? Challenging the definition.
He does. He observes people discuss the black family without defining it, implicitly using the European model. He urges studying African family history to find diverse, functional styles to build strong families today, not just copy a foreign model.
And then there's that really controversial assertion about children's intellect.
Yes, the psychohistory concept, where he posits black children are born intellectually more advanced. But the school system, based on white psychology, becomes a built-in failure mechanism for them, hindering their natural development.
He claims oppression thrives when people are distracted, excited by nonsense and bored by stuff they should be learning.
Exactly. That manufactured distraction and disinterest is the foundation of oppression, he argues. Even freedom of choice in education can be an expression of your enslavement if the fundamental truths are hidden or inverted. trying the same failing methods over and over is like neurotic behavior.
It's a powerful indictment of the whole system. And he says perceived negative traits aren't inherent.
Right. He argues things like lack of trust, lack of self-confidence, buying from others. These aren't inherent flaws. They've been instilled through a historical brainwashing to maintain the power situation, serve economic functions for the oppressor.
Like Skinner's rats. Conditioned.
That's his analogy. If another people feeds, waters, houses you, you'll inevitably be transformed like that rat, conditioned to serve the master's interests, consciously or not.
And if you don't learn these dynamics in psychology class,
you will be made dumb. Provocatively, he says, the higher degrees you make, the dumber you'll be if another people rest on your ignorance, because they will educate you into ignorance. The very education offered can be part of the problem.
Which leads him starkly to his call for revolution.
Yes, and racial confrontation. Clarify immediately, he rejects those naive dreams about little black boys holding hands with little black girls and white girls. That's not his vision.
Why does he feel the need for such strong language, beating the drums of war?
He says thinkers like him do it not from malice, but urgent recognition. Our enemies yet rule us, and their numbers increase. Their strength grows exponentially by our celebration of ephemeral victories. He sees complacency in the face of dire threats.
And he paints a really bleak picture of the community state at that time.
Incredibly bleak. Young people falling to crack dope and AIDS, minds terribly wasted in schools mastered by their enemies, illiteracy, lack of self-confidence, rising poverty. And he backs it up. Cites that Business Week article from '88.
Human capital, the decline of America's workforce, asking can they be taught, and proposing importing immigrants.
Chilling stuff. And the New York Times report from '89, blacks found lagging despite gains, concluding full integration was unlikely because of persistent separation despite civil rights laws.
So what's the bottom line for Wilson from all this economic and social data?
A stark, chilling warning. The mere so-called removal of racial barriers is not going to remove 15 to 20 million black people from dying in this country. And then this really unsettling assertion, the removal of apparent racism is a setup for your death.
A setup? How?
He suggests superficial integration masks a deeper, more insidious threat, which leads him to what he calls the chief American dilemma.
Which is?
How do you destroy a people while appearing to care for them at the same time? Truly insidious.
And how does he say it's achieved?
By making it appear that they're destroying themselves. And he criticizes the black middle class for often perpetuating this narrative, focusing on motivation, broken families, rather than the underlying structural racism.
He uses the Planet of the Apes symbolism here.
Yes. The apes realize they do the work, then question why they're slaves. He implies black people are in a similar position, powering the system without controlling it, often without fully grasping their exploitation.
And he expands this globally, saying black people in America can't ignore what happens to Africans elsewhere.
Absolutely. He argues it's profoundly naive, dangerous, to watch the U.S. destroy the African continent, destroy African Caribbeans, destroy Africans in Central and South America, and think those same forces won't destroy them in America.
Rejecting that I'm an American, I'm a human being abstraction.
Passionately. He says death and destruction of black people will follow those kind of abstractions, believing they dilute identity and mask the specific racialized nature of global power.
He talks about language, too, renaming people, the underclass, throwaway people.
Right. To strip emotional connection, dehumanize, make it easier for society to detach. He even interprets the Pope's appeal for Africa's hungry cynically, suggesting those who watch Africans perish wouldn't hesitate to kill him too.
And connects this to the post-Cold War shift the third world is in as the new threat.
Yes, citing naval military schools explicitly saying that. For Wilson, it signals a continued focus on controlling non-white populations globally, just under a new banner.
And he links this to the rise of black political figures in the U.S. Dinkins, Jackson, Powell.
He does. Argues it's not accidental progress, but the American contradiction, a sophisticated control method. Provocatively claiming these so-called civil rights programs were designed to explain the white conscience so that their killing of black people could continue in good conscience.
Wow. That's a heavy accusation.
Extremely. His conclusion is just uncompromising. It must be revolution or it will be death. The oppressor is the tyrant of a thousand faces, but all represent, for him, the face of white supremacy. Adaptive, pervasive, often disguised.
Okay, so where does he leave us? Towards the end, he redefines intelligence itself.
Radically so. He says the essence of intelligence is the ability to adapt to one's circumstances and change those circumstances towards a convenience and survival.
Not IQ scores, not test results.
Fundamentally not. He says intelligence that does not apply to your survival, especially collective survival, isn't true intelligence at all. It challenges our whole societal idea of smart, moving beyond individual achievement to communal, practical intelligence.
So for him, the major problem isn't lack of intelligence, but lack of recognition.
Exactly. Failure to recognize the profound problem systemic white supremacy. This lack of recognition leads to a lack of mental organization, explaining educational difficulties in children. They have no real pressing problem to solve beyond getting a job, which he sees as superficial within the larger oppressive system. He's challenging you to grasp the actual existential purpose of learning in life.
He then gets into religion, Christianity specifically, from a historical, political angle.
Very controversially. He asks the audience to consider that enslaved Africans did not come over all of these ships as Christians. Then the critical question, who taught it to them and why? Strategic.
He reinterprets parts of the Old Testament. Moses.
Yes, seeing it as containing, quote, a whole series of manipulation to control the people. Highlighting Moses killing thousands for disbelief or for associating with foreign women and being rewarded by God.
So his view of Christianity
is that, as projected and interpreted by whites, it's designed to maintain white power and make black people admit your continued enslavement. He sees it not just spiritually, but as a tool of political and social control.
He also addresses the really difficult topic of black-on-black violence.
Courageously, yes. He argues the attitudes of antipathy that exist among us flow from betrayals in our past as people, and warns that denying them and trying to cover over them is not going to solve the problem.
He mentions Chinvesu's book, The West and the Rest of Us, about African participation in the slave trade.
Yes, and Wilson sees an echo in his present, arguing current black elites are effectively selling out the bulk of African people. It's a disturbing historical parallel for him.
And he connects this to repentance and atonement for both sides.
He believes until white people repent and reparate the sins of their fathers, genuinely atone and make reparations, they will continue to die and suffer. And similarly, until black people face the reality of internal betrayal, they too will continue to suffer. A call for radical honesty all around.
Which leads him back to education, redefining black education.
Yes, arguing it must be about restoring those characteristics and knowledges and forms of relationships that have been stolen in order that the white man remain supreme. Not just integrating, but rebuilding something lost.
And this connects to power and money, his critique of wealthy black people.
Right. He controversially asserts the rich black people are more imprisoned by the system and more dedicated to maintaining it, using Johnson Publications as an example of being bland and non-offensive to power, seeing their wealth as often maintaining the status quo.
So for him, it's not a lack of money, fundamentally, because black people collectively have wealth.
That's his argument. Could be the 9th or 10th richest nation if organized. The real block, he believes, is the social organization of black people and the nature of their social relations, preventing systematic use of that wealth for liberation.
True revolution, then, requires more than protest.
It requires profound transformation through concrete reality that we create, building, owning structures, not just reacting.
And he thinks a small group can achieve this.
He believes it only takes a relatively small group of people to move a story revolution and taking over economically many places. He also observes, subtly, that freedom of speech often exists because power knows most won't really listen or act on transformative ideas. Mentality itself is controlled.
Which is why transformation must be built in concrete and mortar.
Exactly. Tangible, economic, social control. Not just ideas. Collective ownership, moving beyond illusions of individual progress. That's the path he lays out.
And there you have it. Wow. A truly, truly deep dive into Dr. Amos Wilson's lecture, Moving Beyond White Supremacy. We've unpacked his profound analysis of history, not just as past events, but as a practical, sometimes brutal guide.
A guide for survival and liberation, yeah.
We looked at his unflinching critique of symbolic gains, his insistence on understanding the systemic structural nature of power. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, the Lion's Den fam listener tuning in? This deep dive, I hope, encourages you to question those conventional narratives of progress, to look beyond the surface.
Yeah, to recognize the deeper, often subtle power dynamics at play. in society, maybe even within your own mind.
It's about becoming truly well-informed, right? Not just on facts, but on their enduring implications.
Absolutely. This dive really highlights Dr. Wilson's call for constant vigilance, a profound reevaluation of what authentic freedom and progress even look like. For him, remember, the fight against white supremacy isn't just about overt racism.
No, it's deeper.
It's about understanding a systemic force that's incredibly adaptive. It can even appear non-racist, benign, while subtly maintaining profound control.
And that final point he makes, that society is actually becoming more supremely racist when it is apparently not racist, that's deeply unsettling.
It is. So the question left for you is, how does this perspective challenge your understanding of progress and freedom in your own life and society? And what subtle forms of control, of manipulation might be overlooked if you don't engage in what he calls that correct reading of history and power?
Something to truly mull over, a lot to think about.